Have you ever gotten halfway through a button band and realized that your pickup rate was pretty crummy? And then you've had to go back and pull that all out and redo the pickup? That's horrible. We've got a lot going on over here at AKA Nora Knits, and it's all very exciting. By golly, I figured it out.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today. If you're new here, like I said, I'm Nora. I'm coming to you from a small farm in Connecticut. I have been knitting for about a year and a half at this point, and I have very much enjoyed talking about my knits here with you on the channel, where my philosophy is the imperfections are what make something so perfectly handmade. So if that seems like something that you could get on board with, then I definitely invite you to coming out with us more often. I post a podcast video just like this one every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So I think with that being said, I feel like we have a lot to chat about today. I will be talking about the two whips that I have just been focusing on over the past week, really over the past couple of weeks, and all of the progress I've made on them, as well as summarizing just some other thoughts and plans and things that I have. And at the end of the video, we will be talking about the wrapping up of the knit along I have been hosting, Stash Bust Spring. So I think without further ado, we should just go ahead and dive on in. I will mention really quick, there is a vicious fly that is in here right now, and I think I've already seen it fly across the lens once. So if you happen to see it, I am so sorry. It is evasive. So it is joining us for the podcast today. But without further ado, I'd like to start with the whip that has been on my needles the longest. That is going to be my Sand Cardigan by Maria Isayeva of Ulen Knitwear. I am knitting this cardigan out of my dream yarn, which is Nora Madara, and the colorway 01 Sake. I have been working on this project for so long now, and I am very much ready to be wrapping it up. And I'm very happy to say that we are in the finishing touch stages, although it doesn't exactly feel that close to being done, because I know that what I'm working on right now is going to take way longer than I anticipated. So let's just go ahead and take a peek. Here we have it. So this nearly ankle length cardigan, I have knit on 4.5 millimeter needles, though it was intended to be knit on 5 millimeter needles. I got my best gauge with 4.5, and I am knitting it in the size 5, with the exception of the sleeves, which I knit in the size small, which makes me question if I'm knitting the size 5. Hang on. Yes. I'm knitting this in the size 5, and I knit the sleeves at the smallest size. So that would be the size 1. And that was just because I felt like the sleeves were a little bit too gapey for me. Now, last week when we spoke, I had just finished blocking this. I mean, it was still literally a little bit damp. And then I was determining how I would go about the folded hem. And I have to stop myself really quick, because I swear my brain has been a ball of absolute mush. It has exited my head, and it's been on a vacation, and I'm trying to welcome it back, but it's taking a little bit of time. So I said last week something that was inaccurate about the pattern. And I think I just read it wrong, and whatever, who knows. But the hem is a folded hem. And I thought that the pattern had said when you are ready to begin all of the rows that will make up the folded hem, you will start by doing a purl row, so that essentially you would see like a purl ridge on the outside, and that would also make it easier to identify which row you're folding up the folded hem to. And I thought that was a cool concept, and I was going to do that. And then I read the pattern again, and that's not at all what happens. And I was like, where was my brain? So then when I read it again and realized that that was not at all what was happening, it simply was to finish on a purl row and then start knitting the rows that make up the folded hem, I decided to follow that. Now, in the pattern, she suggests that you've been working with 5mm needles for the body, and then when you are ready to knit the folded hem, you have to anticipate that there's going to be that extra length, and you're going to knit double that. So essentially, however far you are from your desired length, you're supposed to knit double that. And she tells you a specific number in the pattern, but I preferred to go a little bit more just based off of, I wanted a little bit of a taller hem. Oh my God, the fly is so loud. Can you hear that? So I knit my wrong side row, and she does tell you to drop down your needle size from your 5mm needle to a 4mm needle to knit the rows that make up the folded hem. I had knit the full body with the 4.5mm needle, but I did still just drop down to a 4mm needle for the outside rows of the folded hem because it's being folded up and under. So I switched over to a 4mm needle. In the first row that I did, I actually worked in a lifeline by inserting some embroidery thread through the hole of my interchangeable needles, and then proceeding to work that first row over the embroidery thread. And that essentially just would make it easier for me to identify that that was the first row when it came time to fold the hem up. I've done that once before, and I found that to be a really nice trick, just so that when you are working across, sewing a hem down or picking up stitches to an entire row across a body, it's so much easier to just see it's the one above the thread or below, however you're looking at that. So that was what I had done. She says to knit 8 rows for each side of the folded hem. So that would be a total of 16 rows after you've decided to drop down your needles. And when I reached the 8th row, I felt like it was going to be a little bit too shallow. So I actually continued to 10, and that would be what would make up the total height of the folded hem. So from the point that I dropped down my needles from the 4.5mm to the 4mm, I knit 10 rows. Then I decided to drop down my needle size again. So she wanted you to drop down a full millimeter needle size from the body to the folded hem. And I was just nervous that I was going to get too dense a fabric with that small a needle size, which is the only reason why I didn't do that. But after having knit the first 10 rows with the 4mm needle, I felt comfortable dropping down my needle size again. And that also allows the fabric to have a little bit more of a natural folding point because there is no purl row or anything like that to tell the fabric where to fold. I found this to be really, really helpful. And next time I do folded hems, I would do that exact system again. So you'd have 3 different needle sizes, one for the body, one for the outside facing folded hem rows, and then one smaller for the inside facing folded hem rows. And I found that when I went to go fold that fabric over, it was very easy. It wanted to fold at that point. Now, when I got to the point where it was actually time to sew down the edge, I've done folded hems before in 2 different ways. And the pattern simply said, now fold and sew down the folded hem. It didn't tell you how to do it exactly. And so I felt like I was left up to my own, whatever works for me, which I'm okay with that in a pattern. So I thought about the two ways I've done folded hems before. The first one being a 3-needle bind off, which I actually really love a 3-needle bind off. I think that it's fun and simple, and it's for me, that had been the easiest method, where you would go through and pick up stitches of the point where you're going to sew that fabric back down to, and then do your 3-needle bind off and essentially just bind off like that. The only thing is that when you do that, I have found that spot where you've attached your 3-needle bind off, I feel like it does want to fold up at that point. So I thought about, okay, option B is to bind off loosely all of the stitches and go through and sew the hem down, either by just picking up a stitch, one every 5 stitches or so. I've done that before, which is very quick and easy. However, when you're looking at that from the wrong side, I feel like if it's not perfect, it doesn't look the best. What I liked about the idea of binding off and then sewing down was the fact that I wouldn't have to go back and pick up all those stitches. I just don't like picking up stitches. That might be a theme with this pattern. So I decided to do some digging on how I could do a folded hem without having to pick up stitches first. And I found a really great video that showed me how, and it wound up being so simple. I think especially because I had put in that lifeline, it was really easy to identify where I was picking up my stitches to sew down to. So I will link the video down below, but what I'll tell you is that essentially, I had all of my live stitches on the needle at the very edge, and the tutorial had me cut the yarn, and with a tapestry needle, almost the way that you would do an Italian sewn bind off, where you insert the needle knitwise and pull it off the needle. That was what I was doing. And then I was inserting that needle through one of the purl stitches that you see on that reverse stockinette fabric. And that was tacking the live stitch down to the fabric. And it was that simple the whole way through. It was pick up a stitch from the needle, knitwise, pull it off, stitch it down by inserting the tapestry needle up through the next garter stitch over, or the next purl stitch over. And because I had the lifeline there, I was able to kind of stretch the fabric out and see, okay, yeah, that's the next one. And it made it really easy. I think overall it took me maybe about an hour. It wasn't that long a process. And I was just very careful to keep things on the loose side because I didn't want it to cinch in. And then when I got to the end, I just had to weave in my end. It actually worked out that the ball of yarn that I was working off of, I literally, down to weaving in the end, that was the last little bit of that yarn that I had on that ball. So it wound up working out perfectly, but I can still get a good amount of stretch, which I attribute to doing it loosely. I think that the inside looks really clean and lovely. So I'm super pleased with that. And overall, I would 100% choose that method again. I think that the only thing that I am maybe a little concerned about is that if I pull, I can kind of stretch. I could feel a yarn that's remaining stationary while other stitches are kind of floating across it. And I'm just assuming that that's because I did do things so loosely. So things kind of need to maybe settle into place. But the point is that it at no point is this like cinching in my fabric and stealing away from the right side. It looks really clean. It looks like you've sewed something down, but it's not tugging on the stitches at all. And so I found that to just be a really effective way of doing things. I'm really happy with the way that the folded hem, the process went, as well as the finished product. So really love that. I would highly recommend following that tutorial for the next time you do a folded hem. Now, after that point was the double knit button bands. So if you've ever knit any button bands before, you know that typically you finish your cardigan and then you go back around the whole raw edge of that cardigan and you have to pick up all of those stitches. And that is what you are working from to create your button band. And the idea of picking up as many stitches as I would have had to from my ankles to the back of my neck, back down to my ankles, that was just not something I was interested in doing. Not at all. Not at all. And so I was determined to find a way to knit this double knit button band without having to pick up all of the stitches first. And by golly, I figured it out. I could not find a tutorial for exactly what I was picturing. However, by following a few different techniques and tutorials, I was able to come up with a way that worked for me on how I could start knitting my double knit button band here. And I have to say, it's so much easier than I thought it would be. I don't know that I will ever go through and pick up an entire button band ever again. So before I tell you how I went about it, I want to tell you two things. So first of all, I decided to knit a wider button band than what the pattern suggests. That's because when I was looking at the footage of me trying this on and trying it on together, I realized that there was a mistake that I feel like I made way back when I cast this on. And this is my advice if you're going to knit something like this. The pattern calls for your bust measurement, your bust circumference, and that's how you choose your size. Meanwhile, it kind of didn't cross my mind that I should have actually measured the largest part of my body that this would have to travel over, which is, of course, my hips, my butt. And I think I would have sized up had I thought of that sooner. Now, I don't want to be drowning in this cardigan, so I'm satisfied with the size that I'm knitting this at. But the reality is that I can't fully enclose myself in it, and I can almost even barely just overlap the front sort of panels of the cardigan. And so I decided to knit the button band just a little bit wider to give me a little bit extra width. And I think it'll look very proportionate to the rest of the cardigan. I played around with exactly how much wider I wanted to knit it. I believe that she says to do what would essentially be 5 stitches wide. And I think I went for more 7 or 8. I can't remember exactly, but I just created more stitches for the button band. And my reference for doing that part of it, at least, was kind of trying to mimic the height of the sewn hem in the width of the button band. So if that's helpful to you, then there you go. So yes, I decided to knit it wider, and I'm going to sort of explain what I had done, and I'll show some clips, but I think what I'm going to do is actually post a real tutorial on how to do this, and I will leave it linked down below. I'm thinking it's going to live on a separate channel, just because I'm not a tutorial channel and I don't want anyone to think that. So I don't want to clutter up my personal channel here with a random tutorial that's I don't know if anyone actually cares about, but I will link it below so that you can go watch that. And then this way, if I ever have any other things that I feel like I need to show a more full in-depth video on, I could just land it over there and it won't bother those of you who don't want to see a tutorial. So That's something to note too, but it'll definitely be linked below. So, but I'll explain it and I'll just show like the Cliff Notes version here. I cast on the double knit button band on double pointed needles using the Italian cast on. And that's how I've started a double knit button band before, so nothing new there. And essentially worked my way towards the body of the cardigan, at which point the very last stitch that was on the needle, I slipped from one needle to the next, did a yarn over, then inserted the needle through the hem of the sweater the same way you would if you were just going through and picking up all of your stitches for the button band, scooped up the yarn from the back, adding it now to the right hand needle, and then to secure that onto the needle and integrate the button band, I took the last slipped stitch as well as the yarn over and picked them up like a cast off and pulled them over the new stitch that was picked up. Then flip the work around and continue as you would a standard double knit button band. So knit, slip to the end, flip over, knit, slip to the end. Last stitch gets slipped knitwise, yarn over, insert needle as you would when picking up your stitches, scooped up that yarn, and then brought the last slip stitch and the yarn over the new picked up stitch. Now, there's a pickup rate that you're told to follow in the pattern. When you're looking at tutorials on how to knit a double knit button band, a lot of them say to pick up your stitch every other row of the cardigan body. But I think it's really dependent on your row gauge. Now, I am knitting the double knit button band with a, is there no name on this? Oh my. These are my DPNs. I'm going to guess and say that this, I'm like looking for them around here. So I'm knitting the double knit button bands on 3.5 millimeter DPNs. And being that the body was knit on 4.5 millimeter needles, the row gauge is obviously off. One of the things that I like about doing this button band this way is, have you ever gotten halfway through a button band and realized that your pickup rate was pretty crummy? And then you've had to like go back and pull that all out and redo the pickup? That's horrible. In this situation, if you are going and realizing that your pickup rate is off, it doesn't affect anything but the last few rows where you're seeing that things are going awry. So what I mean by that is you can see it kind of down here at the bottom. Now, I obviously blocked the whole body of the sweater, did not block the hem. And then, of course, I'm in the middle of knitting the button band, so it is not blocked either. But do you see how I'm getting this little bit of a curve here? I had played around a little bit with, should I pick up every row, every other row, follow the pickup rate of the pattern? And what I landed on was like something in between. I found that if I picked up every row, the side where I was integrating the button bands with the body of the cardigan was really bunching and rippling because I was trying to cram too many stitches in one spot. Then had I just done every other row, I was finding that actual button band was doing a very extreme version of what it's doing right now, where it's curving. It was literally like a C shape, because the side of the button band that was attaching to the cardigan was so elongated, but the actual rows of the button band were not. And so it was kind of contorting in on the edge side. What I landed on was like just eyeballing it. And I think I've gotten better as I've gone. Some of the things that I have been doing to make sure I'm staying consistent and keeping things as clean as possible is I do give everything a good little stretch, because we have to keep in mind that this will be blocked. So when I've given it a good stretch, I see that this has the ability to straighten out without maximum force, just about as much as I would give it while blocking it. And I've even eased up a little bit as I've gone, because I was learning as I went. And so you could see that things towards the middle really cleaned up. And at this point, my button band is just about, I think I was close to the underarm. Let's call that maybe 10 inches under the underarm is where I've left off. Sorry, it's such a behemoth to try and hold up. Underarm double knit button band. So as I've been going, if I am unsure about which should I pick up the next row or skip a row, I've really just been using the needle that's holding the button band as my guide. If it is seriously contorting one way or another, then I can determine, all right, we need to cool it with the pickup and just pick up the next row, or, ooh, we're getting a little bit crazy on the edge side, so let's go ahead and skip a row here. And I've been able to use that as my guide. Only once or twice have I actually ripped out maybe 10 or 20 rows because I felt like things were contorting too much. And that was the easy thing about it, was that when I reached that point and saw it, I just had to rip out those 10 or 20 rows. And it took 10 or 20 minutes to get back to that point. Not the end of the world. I'd certainly rather that than have already picked up the whole button band, knit up to this point and realize that my pickup rate was all wrong, and then have to undo everything and the pickup and start over. So I'm really thrilled that I was able to figure this out. I was really proud of myself. I was literally sitting here like, I did it. When I figured it out. So I'm really proud of it. And I think that the button band is just looking really clean and polished exactly how I wanted it to. I will say too that as I'm going, if I'm erring on one side or another, as far as the rate that I'm picking up, I am erring on the side of having picked up too many stitches rather than not enough, because realistically, I would rather block this and not stretch it at all than block it and be sitting here aggressively stretching things. So I just think that it's going to look so good when it's done. And it's just taking a long time because there's a lot of ground to cover. I believe now that I would have started knitting this double knit button band maybe 2 or 3 days ago. And anytime I've had time to just like sit down and focus on knitting or crafting, it has been with this. So I've put in some hours, definitely. And like I said, I'm really just at the point where I've almost hit the underarm of the first side. So I guess we could say it's about just over a quarter of the way done, which is great. I mean, it's just one of those things that takes so long, but it's so good in the end. So I'm really proud of myself for figuring that out. I am using the DPNs that I had purchased a little earlier this year. These are the Knit Picks wooden DPNs, and I think that these are the 4-inch. And I will tell you, I can't recommend these, and it's my own fault. I didn't actually realize when I had purchased them the size. Like, I don't know, I just was like, oh yeah, I need DPNs. Didn't really think much about it beyond that. And my only issue with these is that when I'm working with them, I have to be very conscious to not just have it poking me in the hand as I'm working, because they're just a little too short. So if you are looking to purchase DPNs, I recommend the Knit Picks needles across, the board. but I would go for at least a 5-inch, unless you want to be poked in the hand all the time. And when I'm not working on this, there's always a needle that lives in the double knit button band, and then the other one, so as to not lose it, I have just been tucking inside of the button band wherever I am. So I feel like that was very long-winded, but I wanted to make sure that I explained that. And like I said, I'm going to do my best to have some video support on here as well as linked below. Because I think that you need to try this for your next double knit button band. Or, I mean, it would work for any vertical integrated button band. So if you were doing ribbing, that would work. I don't know. It'll work for your double knit button band. So that's where we're at on the sand cardigan. Did I say how long it's even been on the needles? This project has been a work in progress for 116 days today. It's still going to be a little bit, but happy to be getting through the button band now. Now, the next whip I'm going to talk to you about is my messy dressy. This is the Argentinian soccer team jersey inspired crochet dress that I have been working on for a few weeks. I never started a countdown for this one. I don't know the exact date that I cast it on, but I know it's been a few weeks. I didn't actually realize people would be as invested in it, and I'm glad that you are because I am too. What I can tell you is that as I'm sitting here, I've just created a count up timer to the actual game that I'm planning to wear this dress to, which is my deadline, and that is 11 days away. So it's good that I've made some excellent progress on this. And you know what? I'm just going to bring in a special guest to help me show this one off. This is different. Okay, this is Betty. She is my pretty janky dress form. It's one of those adjustable ones, and I could never get it to the right measurements, so she wears a bra to help out with that. Let me prop this up. I'm going to sit over here a little bit so that I could keep this in frame so I can tell you a little bit more about what I've been doing. So last week I told you that I was working on sewing up my granny squares together. The granny squares, I have crocheted a ton of these granny squares. It's the style where it's more of a dense fabric and then just some smaller holes in it. And the white ones are done with Lily Sugar and Cream cotton, and the blue is done with a couple of different thrifted cones of blue, I'm assuming cotton yarn. And I have officially created the 2 central panels of the dress. So what I mean by that is essentially from this corner to this corner, across this edge and down, this is one panel that I have sewn up. And this is the matching one. So one's for the front and one is for the back. And I just kind of figured if I had done that at the very least, I could build the rest of the shaping off of that and get a better sense of seeing it on myself, aka Betty. And I'm so glad that I had done that. I think it really allows me to see exactly how I wanted to shape the neckline and all of these other things. So absolutely adoring the walking presser foot. I love that you guys loved my explanation on how that works last week. That cracked me up. But I'm loving it, and I got into such a groove of sewing. I had my audiobook on, and I was just, it was fun. It was fun to sew up these little panels. The only thing was that I got into such a groove that, again, I just blew past some of my plans. So in order to create something that looks exactly like the jersey that I'm trying to recreate, there is actually supposed to be this blue square for the back. It's supposed to be divided into thirds where it's like a skinny blue, skinny white, skinny blue. And I just breezed by and sewed up the full panel. I'm not going to undo all of this. What I'm thinking I will do is actually just crochet a white stripe. Like, I think I'm literally just going to do a strip of white double crochets, and I will sew that down the center, and that will just break that up. And yes, it's going to sit off slightly, but I think it will be totally fine. And so at this point, I am ready to wrap up the sort of granny square portion of this dress. And I ran out of white yarn. So actually today my white yarn should be arriving so that I can finish crocheting, I believe, 30 more white squares. Once I've done that, those squares will be going on. Let's see. If you could see, I pinned a couple on the side there. So there's going to be another stripe of white crocheted granny squares going down basically after the waist. And it will be right after I crochet that little triangle bit to add some shaping. Then I also have to sew on the shaping that I have just pinned out here. So I've just pinned this top row on, but I will be sewing down these two blue triangles to create just a little bit more of a curve in, and then the 3 more squares here to continue the stripes. The only other thing that I was playing with and kind of wanted your opinion on is I feel like it would be nice then to have another triangle. This is how I did this, by the way. I just was like folding up the squares and determining where I felt like I needed that extra shaping. And it was really good. It helped me figure this out. So I'm kind of thinking if I do another set of triangles here, I'll get a nice crew neck shaping and everything's going to be bordered in black. Otherwise, I think it looks a little too fancy still. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. And once all of the actual granny squares are done, what's left to do are the black and white stripes that will be going on the sides of this. And then the black knit ribbing that I plan to do on the neck as well as around the arms. And that's really going to be the finishing touches. So yes, I have 11 days. And then once all of that is done, it's the details of the numbers and the patches. I'm considering buying some patches for the little detailed things since I am in a little bit of a time crunch, but I'll figure it out whatever it is. I'm just really thrilled with how this is going so far. So I wanted to pull this out so I could get your opinion on should I leave it so that it is just like a square neck and then like a skinny black strap? Or should I pull the white up into a little bit more shaping and have it, I think it would almost mimic like a racer back style with more of a crew neck if I do that. So it kind of scoop in and then all of this would be edged out in the black. I think that would look nice, but let me know your thoughts. And then the only other thing that I'm kind of toying with is the crochet skirt that I am loosely, I mean, it's really strayed far away from it now, but you know, the idea kind of came from it. I had crocheted that and left a slit in the front, and I'm toying with the idea of leaving a slit in the stripes somewhere. The reason being that it is cotton, it is kind of heavy, so it tends to just like sit on your lap when you're sitting and be like a big cotton blanket. I mean, it's kind of hefty. So I might add a slit in the front, or do we think that I should do like a split front and back so that there's a slit on either side? I think that would maybe give it a little bit more of a sporty look versus like a dress or a gown. I don't want it to look like a gown. I want it to look a little like boho beachy jersey. So yeah, I mean, this is so cool. It's really fun to see this come together. And I'm going to, like I had said, on the reverse side, all of my ends are still hanging out, and I am just going to take some fabric tack and tack those down with that and snip. We're making this easy peasy. So yeah, I did crochet way too many blue squares. So I have like a ton of those left over, and then still have to crochet up, like I said, I think about 30 white squares, as well as the couple of triangles that I need in the white too. So we're getting really close. I'm hoping that that yarn comes today, and maybe I could just sit down and focus on that and just get everything crocheted. So then I can assemble and then start with the stripes, because the black yarn's coming today too. So I'm very excited. I'm glad that you guys are excited about this. And yeah, since we are 11 days away, I better just get a move on. If you are not into sewing, I can imagine that this is like foreign territory, but I have to say I actually never considered using my dress form for any of my knitting or crochet projects before. And the difference between just holding these panels up and looking at them on my own body in the mirror, it's like there's no way for you to take a step back and really see it. So I was really struggling to figure out how I would come up with the rest of this neckline and really where is this hitting me? And I could kind of tell, but not really. So it was so liberating to be able to put it on the dress form. And I genuinely did just take different shapes and squares and I just pinned them on. And I was able to see, do I want more of a tank top with just the square neckline, which was my original vision. But then I also liked the tank top I had on last week where it came up a little higher. And so I added a little bit more height here. And then feeling like I wanted something that was a nice close crew neck, but had a little shaping and scooped in. And just being able to puzzle piece all of those things together on the dress form. If you can get your hands on a dress form, even if it's not your perfect size, just to be able to see a garment on something else when you're making decisions, like for a neckline or, a yoke, if anything like that, if you're having doubts or questions, it's so nice to be able to just put it on another figure and then take that step back and look at it. So I definitely recommend that if you don't have a dress form, you don't need the fanciest one, you don't need the most expensive one. In fact, I will see if I can link this one down below. It's not the greatest, but it's she's a fuller figured girly. And so it gives me the best idea for what something's going to look like on me. And it's just, yeah, it's nice to see. So I just wanted to point that out. If you're like, dress form, that's for sewing. I do think that there's a place for it in your knitting and your other crafts. So that's the messy dressy, and we have 11 days to get it done, which means that by the next time we chat, it better be just wrapping things up. So those are the whips that I've been working on. Obviously, if you've been here before, you know that I hadn't touched the Florence tank, and so that's still in hibernation. I plan to get to it, but I just need to find the time and mental space to do it, which brings me to the fact that I thought I was going to have that like all said and done by the end of Stash Bust Spring. And I said that out loud without realizing that that's next week. Friday, June 21st is the official end of spring on the calendar, which means that the podcast I put up on June 22nd is going to be the final prize giveaway entry video where you can enter to win prizes for Stash Bust Spring. A quick refresher for the sort of rules. It's been modified since I began this knit along. And I want to say first, thank you so much to those of you who've been participating. It's really been fun to see other people trying to get yarn out of stash and just utilizing what you have, which was the point of the knit along to begin with. So the, official end will really be June 22nd, which is when you'll be able to comment on that video here on YouTube, letting us know what projects you worked on for Stash Bust Spring. So that's any project ongoing. It can still be a whip. It can be a finished object. You could literally cast it on next week, but just let us know, what did you bust from your stash and on what project did you do it? If you had multiple projects, you're more than welcome to enter with multiple comments on that video next week. And again, I will make it so clear then. I just want to give you the heads up. if you want to maybe cast on that last project that you were really wanting to bust the stash for, you can do that before then. But there will be 3 ways to enter. One will be through that video, another will be through the Instagram post, and the other will be through just utilizing the hashtag StashBustSpring on Instagram. I'm going to have a few digital prizes for international, and then within the US, I will have more physical prizes that I'll be able to ship out to you. So I'll discuss all of that next week, but we are coming to an end. This is the final week to get those projects going, get that yarn out of stash. And I'm just so excited that you guys have been loving this challenge as much as I have been. So we will definitely talk more about that next week. Quickly, I'll jump to acquisitions. Like I said, I had to order some more of the white cotton for the messy dressy, and I just ordered another cone of that Lily Sugar and Cream cotton in the white, as well as one in black to complete all the finishes. So I ordered those. They should be here today. And the other acquisition that I had was made on Worldwide Knit in Public Day, which was this past Saturday. And I decided after much deliberation that we would just spend that day out in a park doing a little bit of knitting. I posted about it on Instagram a little bit, but I realized that it was the only weekend I have for a good while that as a bridal hairstylist, I didn't have a wedding. So I was just happy to chill out, and we enjoyed the park with my boyfriend, with OC. And so we had a really good time. And we wound up, I popped into a local yarn shop, Nancy O's, and picked up a ball of yarn that I think will work for the pockets on my sand cardigan. So that was the other acquisition that I had made. I purchased this Jody Long My Little Sunshine yarn. It is a fingering weight. It's 60% cotton and 40% acrylic, which I just figured would be a really great makeup for pockets, something that's going to see a lot of wear and tear potentially. And I was looking for something that would be on the finer side so that we could minimize the bulk over the hips in those pockets. So once the double knit button band is done, the pockets and the cuffs are all that's left to do on that sand cardigan. So I now have this ready and waiting. The colorway of this gray is called Cuddles. I will say it's a little bit on the cooler side for what I would have preferred, but for the budget, it was worth it. And really the idea is that you're not going to see it so much. So it's a very cool gray. It does border like a very, very pale baby blue. And this single ball of yarn costs a total of $10.90. And that is for 360 yards of yarn on a 100-gram ball. So plenty of yarn here. We'll see what we're going to do with the leftover, because I know that there's going to be a ton left over, but that's what's going to be for the pockets. And that was the acquisition that was made this week. So lastly, just to recap on the plans, it's going to be I would love to get that double knit button band done by next week. If I had to guess, I would say we're going to be very close to getting it done by the next time I film, but not quite. So keep chugging along on the double knit button band. Once all of my squares are crocheted for the messy dressy, there's a lot of finishing work that will still need to be done. And so I am going to obviously continue on that, prioritize it a bit since I do have 11 days before the game I plan to wear it to. But something that I noticed this week, as I said that I would not be casting on anything new, working on anything new, until one of these 2 major projects are done, I realized that I had a lack of mindless knitting or crocheting or whatever. I have to focus on that double knit button band. I have to look at my crochet. And so for moments like watching our weekly soccer games, I had nothing that I could work on without looking at it. And so for that reason, once my granny squares are crocheted, I am going to allow myself to pull out the Sailor Swift top that I had just worked on for one day and mentioned last week as strictly only, it's only, the only time I will allow myself to work on that is when it's like I literally cannot work on anything else. So for that soccer watching, knitting, and things like that. So I am probably going to wind up digging that out and getting just a pinch of work done on it over the next week. But certainly not until all of my white granny squares are done. Because that's a big priority. Otherwise, if I can find that time to get to the Florence tank, I will. But I'm pretty sure it's going to happen after the messy dressy is done, just because I feel like I need one thing to kind of clear out of my brain before I can really focus on something like that. But those are the plans, the acquisitions, the whips. Yeah, exciting stuff going on over here. So this is your reminder, one more week to get those projects going for Stash Bust Spring. Definitely keep us posted about what you're working on over on Instagram using hashtag StashBustSpring. And I'm so excited to show you guys the prizes that we have and get all of that going as well. We've got a lot going on over here at AKA Nora Knits, and it's all very exciting. If you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoy knitting content in general, I definitely would so appreciate it if you would give this video a thumbs up. If you subscribe and ring the bell, you'll be notified anytime I post a new video, which we should be talking about some summer plans soon. However, I do post, like I said, a podcast every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And with all that being said, big ol' thanks for watching. I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.